Good morning. My name is Valerie Lundy-Wagner, and I'm the Higher Education Center Associate Director and Research Fellow at the Public Policy Institute of California. Welcome to our virtual program today featuring findings from a recent report entitled Early Insights from the Golden State Pathways Program. The report, technical appendices, policy brief, and slides from today's meeting can be found on our website at ppic.org. This research and event are supported with funding from California Community Foundation, College Futures Foundation, and the Gates Foundation. We'd like to thank them for their support. For today's program, I will present some of the key findings from the report and then invite my colleague and another co-author of the report, Olga Rodriguez, to join me for a discussion of key takeaways and to answer questions from our virtual audience. If you have any questions, please send them along with your name and organization to the email address on screen, ppicEventsQuestions@gmail.com. As a reminder, PPIC is a public charity and does not take or support positions on any ballot measure or legislation, nor does it support, endorse, or oppose any political parties or candidates for public office. And with that, I will start the presentation. The Golden State Pathways Program is an initiative that really seeks to bring together college and career readiness reforms. That said, before I jump in, let me start with a little bit of context. Career preparation and readiness often translates into career and technical education. Research on career and technical ed, or CTE, shows that participation is associated with positive outcomes, including high school graduation, college enrollment, and earnings. Since the mid-1980s, the state of California has helped establish career academies, strengthen the CTE curriculum, facilitate cross-sector engagement, and promote pathways. Yet historically, college and career have been siloed in curriculum, funding, and policy. Stakeholders increasingly realize in California and outside that most high-demand, high-wage, high-mobility careers will require some post-secondary education, college, CTE, or both. As of 23-24, just less than half of the high school students graduating in California completed A through G requirements, which are a primary way to measure college readiness in California. 40% of high school grads are participating in CTE courses and about 10% taking one CTE dual enrollment course. That said, what is GSPP? Established in 2022, the Golden State Pathways Program is a competitive, one-time, 5-year investment to promote pathways in high-wage, high-skill, and high-growth areas, encourage cross-sector collaboration, and enable access to workforce training to support workforce development. More tangibly, this translates into a few key areas: developing CTE courses and pathways in locally relevant and statewide priority sectors, integrating college readiness with career and technical education, implementing college acceleration models, that is, advanced placement, dual enrollment, international baccalaureate, and articulated courses in ways that help high school students earn up to 12 units of college credit, scaffolding work-based learning, and then providing needed wraparound student supports. Here you can see our research questions, but maybe what I'll say is the main purpose of our study is to understand challenges and opportunities for implementing large-scale college and career readiness reforms like GSPP in high school statewide. Although this legislation was enacted in 2022, funds were not distributed until spring 2025, with many local education agencies, or LEAs, still in planning mode. As such, what I'll be presenting to you is really our research to understand how grants were allocated, to which of those LEAs, in which regions, and then plans for implementation. Overall, our methodological approach included 4 components: a literature review to assess the evidence on pathway reforms, including on CTE and career pathways, dual enrollment, work-based learning, and student supports, a descriptive analysis of grantees focusing on enrollment and demographic information from the California Department of Education, as well as grant allocations across LEAs, regions, and pathways, conducting a document analysis using GSPP implementation grant narratives, also from the Department of Education. And then finally, we conducted structured interviews with 15 leaders, either closely linked to the GSPP applications or local planning and execution as the grant is rolled out. We took care to include leaders from each of the 7 regions as well. So how were these implementation grants distributed? In the next few slides, I'll share a high-level overview of our descriptive analysis based on data from the California Department of Education. In some places, I will share data culled from the grantee application analysis that we performed. So for the purpose of this presentation, there are 3 GSPP grant types: planning grants for LEAs to establish CTE courses and pathways, implementation grants for LEAs with existing CTE programs, courses, or pathways that would like to expand or enhance them, consortium grants to support lead applicants and 2 or more program partners. What you can see here is that implementation grants comprise nearly 90% of the funding awarded. So again, that is those grantees who already have a history of doing this work. In terms of the coverage that this grant shows promise for, on the far left, you can see the 23-24 enrollment data from the California Department of Education. In that third column, that's gold, you can see approximately 882,000 of the state's 9th through 12th graders. This is 46% of the state's 9th through 12th graders are enrolled in LEAs that received GSPP implementation grants. In their grant applications, LEAs estimated the number of students likely to participate in GSPP. Based on their reports, we estimate that nearly 530,000 high school students will participate in this program. You can see that on the far right in the orange bar. In terms of demographics, implementation grantees serve higher shares of low-income students. On the far right, you can see this 67% compared to 61% statewide, and higher shares of Latino students. You can see toward the middle of the slide, 60% compared to 57%. In terms of the distribution of pathways by sector, let me first orient you to this. In orange, you can see the priority sectors for the state associated with the GSPP grant program. That's health, education, computer science, or in STEM fields, and climate resiliency fields. Our application analysis found that 77% of all pathways funded under GSPP align to these priority sectors. Now, that said, as you look at this, you can pretty immediately see that the health science pathways are by far the most common, just based on number. They represent 25% of the pathways funded, and the next most common or popular are information and communication technology, representing 16% of these grants, and education, which represents 12% of funded GSPP pathways. In terms of regional distribution, the GSPP implementation grant dollar allocations are generally representative of regional high school shares, ranging from the tens of millions in the Central Coast to more than 100 million in the greater Los Angeles area. Though what might be more important is looking at sort of how GSPP dollars are allocated per pupil. For many regions, the amount allocated under GSPP reflects the share of students enrolled, but there are some notable differences you can see in, for example, Northern California and the Central Coast regions on the far left. The Northern California region has the lowest share, or 2% of high school students in the state, and it receives 6% of implementation grants. And on just next to it, the Central Coast, you can see that region educates 6% of students, but only received 3% of GSPP grant dollars. All right, so that's how the grants were organized and allocated. Next, I'll turn to focus more on what we learned from the interviews, again, weaving in some of the data from our application analysis. Let me first describe our approach. So we prioritize speaking with grantees that have a history of implementing quality structured pathways. For example, those that may have used the linked learning model, which integrates explicitly college and career readiness with work-based learning based on the proportion of minority or socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And then those grantees with lower than average college readiness or going rates. Our interviews focus on understanding history, motivation for pathways, the expected benefits and outcomes, understanding the partners and partnerships for 80% of the grantees' pathways are in high skill, high demand, or high wage occupations. And LEAs are really, by definition, experienced in creating courses, CP course pathways of them, but not necessarily creating them in ways that align with GSPP, where there is definitively college readiness, college acceleration, and career readiness interwoven together. And so their work is really to, and as this quote suggests, assess the goals of GSPP and figure out where there might be alignment with the design and implementation gaps from other initiatives. In addition, LEAs mentioned this tension between college and career or college or career. And our analysis of applications reveals that 83% of GSPP implementation grantees plan to expand integrated college and career programming. Many had already begun this work via other initiatives or funding sources. And in fact, one CTE program coordinator noted 85% of their CTE courses were already A through G aligned. That said, some interviewees described concerns about buy-in for integrating college prep into CTE courses and pathways, since historically stakeholders have really interpreted these as separate. Beyond that, I think another thing that folks talked about was really trying to figure out the tension between requiring things for all students. As you can see from this quote, an assistant principal noted, "We start everyone on the A through G pathway and in 2 dual enrollment courses, but students fall off." And so where and how to manage that seemed important. We've also find that there are multiple models of college acceleration, articulated courses, dual enrollment, advanced placement or AP, and international baccalaureate IB. That said, pretty universally, LEAs are committed to college acceleration by implementing dual enrollment. Articulation is different from dual enrollment, AP and IB, in that the former is considered equivalent to college courses, but the student only gets college credit if they attend that particular college where the course is articulated and enroll in a specific program of study. Furthermore, according to our application analysis, 2/3 of LEA grantees already incorporate AP as part of their GSPP career courses or pathways, and 41% plan to use AP as part of their implementation work. That said, none was identified as the primary acceleration strategy. And so what you can see here in this quote from a program administrator is how completing 12 units of college credit will not be a requirement, not necessarily because they think it's a bad idea, but because of some of the sort of administration associated with doing so. In terms of work-based learning, a number of LEAs describe developing or enhancing their activities and instructional strategies that serve many students, from career exposure, lectures, and field trips to more robust sort of ways of operationalizing this through internships, pre-apprenticeships, or apprenticeships, which tend to be the most robust, but also the most challenging to establish. And in fact, this quote note from a superintendent, I think, articulates well some of the challenges known with work-based learning. They said, in rural communities, we are 99% private businesses. They're usually family operated, and they have 1 to 2 individuals in the business, so supervision and mentorship is very challenging. That said, as we think about all of these different components of GSPP, there is a perennial question: how can California ensure the promise of GSPP is realized for all students? There are known challenges with ensuring high school students have access to a college readiness curriculum, concerns about what a career-ready high school student is and the extent to which that aligns with college or employer expectations. In terms of dual enrollment, research suggests it can be a powerful lever to support college access, enrollment, and success. However, whether the state is significantly increasing who has access, who enrolls, who is successful in college as a result of dual enrollment is not well known. Relatedly, understanding expectations around initiatives like GSPP and comparing them to student outcomes could be powerful and help build an evidence base relevant to state and local policymakers. Finally, the current climate requires us to think about finance. How can we ensure all students benefit from initiatives like GSPP if we're able to get clear on which students need additional resources or support, which models most effectively and efficiently accomplish delivery and result in the desired outcomes? That's the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention. I'd like to now welcome my colleague and again, one of the co-authors of this report, Olga Rodriguez, to join me for a discussion of the key takeaways and policy opportunities.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Valerie, for this presentation. I'm really thrilled to have this discussion today because many, many years ago, I was actually a pathway student. I was a Partnership Academy of Business student while a student at Porterville High School. And back then, I separately took dual enrollment, AP, and I got access to an after-school job through an employment program that offers jobs to low-income youth. I also received college and financial aid application supports from Upward Bound. So I've seen firsthand how the elements that GSPP is now aiming to intentionally weave together really made a difference for my college and career outcomes. So now we'll dive into our discussion by delving deeper into some of our findings of the study. And so we'll begin for a question for Valerie. So Valerie, can you tell us a little bit more about how LEAs decided which CTE courses or career pathways to develop or enhance?
Sure. As I mentioned in the presentation, LEA selected these courses or pathways largely based on where they had existing collaboration with community colleges and their workforce partners already. But some of the program elements were not yet fully aligned with that full college prep, college readiness, and career readiness sort of components. What I didn't mention in the big presentation is how GSPP aligns with other funding opportunities. So over the last 15 to 20 years, there have been multiple state initiatives and programs that focus on career readiness. The CTE Incentive Grant, the K-12 Strong Workforce Program, the California Career Pathways Trust, and College and Career Access Pathways, for example. Each of these efforts provides opportunities for developing or enhancing career pathways, aligning with post-secondary or workforce, and implementing work-based learning. That said, whereas GSPP is a 5-year funding program, those previously mentioned are typically annual funding opportunities subject to annual changes with the budget. What I think we're seeing with GSPP from the interviews is that with more funding certainty through GSPP, grantees are able to conduct longer-term planning associated with the development and really nurturing and maturing of some of these partnerships and programs associated with sort of these CTE courses and programs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that response, Valerie. So next, we know GSPP is a very ambitious program. It has multiple components that cross education and workforce sectors. To some extent, this research really harkens to those previous state investments in CTE and college readiness. Can you tell us a little more about how GSPP follows or complements some of those initiatives?
Yeah, sure. There are multiple CTE and college and career-related initiatives that predate GSPP. Folks can see that in the technical appendix, table C1. That said, GSPP's size and aspirations for alignment and collaboration, I think, really represent the most explicit integration of college and career readiness to date. In fact, GSPP follows the call from California's 2025 Career Ed Master Plan for universal availability of pathway programs. So historically, I think we know students were directed into CTE and career pathways were unable to access the college prep curriculum, meaning they couldn't apply for the state's public universities coming out of high school. That said, with GSPP, there's an opportunity to provide greater access to college prep curriculum for these students, many of whom are historically underrepresented among bachelor's degree holders, which would likely increase the number of students able to apply to CSU and UC. That said, if implemented with fidelity, the state could increase the college-ready population from 45% now to at least 50% or more. Dual enrollment participation could be increased from approximately 30% to, say, 60% of high school students. And it certainly would help more high school students accrue college credit prior to graduation, provide more high school students with hands-on career experiences.
Great, thank you, Valerie. I just want to emphasize a few points here because so we're the higher education center, and so one of the things that really excites us about kind of the possibilities of a program like GSPP that really weaves together college and career readiness is the opportunity to really transform college access and success. We know that one of the biggest barriers, our research has shown that one of the biggest barriers to success and access and success in college is actually college prep. And so the students that are intended to be the focus of these programs are the students that have been most left behind when we look at the share of students being prepared for college. And so completing the college prep requirements is good, regardless of whether you go to a four-year college. They're good if you go to a two-year college. We often hear in our conversations with college leaders and system leaders that students who complete college prep requirements are more on track to complete their FAFSA, to go to college, succeed in college. They are more likely to transfer on time. So it's really kind of has a potential to transform outcomes for the students who have systemically been left behind. So thanks. And so next, we'll delve a little deeper into what the state can do to ensure successful implementation. So given these past initiatives and the research findings on career pathways in and outside of California, let's talk a little bit more about what the state can do to provide more support to ensure a successful implementation. So Valerie, can you weigh in on this?
Yeah, sure. I would say I think two things come to mind immediate. First, let's talk about the quality of pathways and alignment. In GSPP, there are more than 1,300 career pathways being created or developed under GSPP. While grantees plan to align these with higher education or workforce partners' sort of expectations and requirements, there currently is no way to ensure pathways align to community college programs of study, for example, and or meet industry sort of requirements or expectations. With the Career Ed Master Plan and actually last week's passage of AB 1098 and AB 638, which creates the California Education Interagency Council, there's an opportunity to collate policy disconnects and develop a plan for alignment that includes measurable milestones. As part of this process, there could also be space to ensure that state-funded pathways from high school to community college to workforce, and or the CSU or UC, and these credentials align with an appropriate ROI or value. This would help ensure that students are getting the career exposure and readiness valued by employers or the post-secondary institutions, as well as a college prep curriculum that is valued by those same institutions. I think this would really help align and bring together the state's goals noted in GSPP of integrating college and career. The second thing that comes to mind is around how the state might benefit from clear goals. So take, for example, the various reforms wrapped into GSPP, college readiness, college acceleration models, work-based learning. Each represents an opportunity to support this notion of integrated college and career readiness. Yet each of them sort of is associated with different sets of policies that may or may not be aligned. Fewer than half of the state's high school students are graduating college and career ready, and the state, via this legislation or other efforts, has not necessarily enacted a comprehensive policy ensuring that every high school student graduate college and career ready. In this way, LEAs are provided flexibility toward implementation. However, this means where students live may dictate their ability to access and benefit from different parts of the reforms being enacted, which necessarily impacts their educational and economic trajectories. Figuring out this balance is where additional state policy may be instructive. I've been speaking a lot. Olga, maybe I can ask you a question. You mentioned quality. I'm sorry.
I think we can delve a little bit more on the research on dual enrollment, given that it's
Yes.
kind of such a major component.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so go ahead.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Can you share a little bit about the value add of leveraging that particular college acceleration strategy, dual enrollment? What can be done to ensure it helps students succeed in college and career?
Yes, absolutely. So, one of the things that actually surprised me from our study was that when we began analyzing the GSPP applications to really understand what a college acceleration strategies they would be employing as part of their GSPP, we found that virtually all GSPP implementation grantees indicated that they were planning to use or are already using dual enrollment as their college acceleration strategy. And that's pretty exciting because currently only about a third, just under a third of high school graduates are graduating having taken dual enrollment. So there's an opportunity about to definitely expand. And GSPP is really focused on a population that has long been underserved by programs like dual enrollment. So that's really kind of a bright spot, especially if we hear, if we initiatives and kind of goals to get all high school students to complete at least 12 college credits. We know the California Community Chancellor's Office has that as part of their vision. They would like all high schoolers to begin dual enrollment as early as possible. And GSPP really provides this opportunity to provide it as part of this structured program. And I also think this really aligns with Assembly Bill 288, which established the college and career access pathways back in 2016. We've seen that this is actually this type of dual enrollment has really driven the growth, now accounting for just under half of all dual enrollment participation in the state of California. Um, so I'll pause here because I want to emphasize that the aspirations to serve almost half of all high schoolers through GSPP really brings an opportunity. Because through GSPP, districts have expressed through these applications that there is an aspiration to offer dual enrollment as part of all programs. So in a world where we are trying to get universal access to dual enrollment and get all students to complete a set number of credits, we also now have to think about access to which courses and which courses will really maximize students' likelihood of successful college and career outcomes. And so here, I want to really bring in some new research that we published at PPIC over the last year, where we really explored the role of dual enrollment connected to DevEd reforms. Assembly Bill 705, if you guys are familiar, with community college policies. Both AB 288 and AB 705 really intended to bring equity into dual enrollment access as well as to assessment and placement policies. And so we explored the challenges and opportunities of using dual enrollment as a strategy to expand access to Gateway Math, English, and ESL. And it was pretty clear. It was a descriptive study, but we saw that students who take these courses have stronger college going outcomes, accumulate more credits, and are completing and transferring at higher rates. And so I want to emphasize kind of the opportunity to really link these equity-focused policies to really maximize the impact for GSPP. when deciding which courses to offer. The research is clear. Certain sets of courses are able to most successfully support students in making these key transitions. I also want to mention that the opportunity to offer gateway courses also can help the state and the systems really reduce duplication and improve efficiency. Because if for a student that, for example, takes AP calculus or statistics in high school, if they don't get a certain score, they're not going to get that college credit in college. They're going to have to repeat that course. If that student would have taken and passed this course through dual enrollment, through the IGETC, through articulation that happens through assist.org and these statewide partnerships, that student would have only needed to pass the course with a C or better, and they would not have had to take that course again in college. So there is definitely an opportunity to use existing resources devoted to dual enrollment to really be strategic about which courses to offer.
Yep.
So,
Thanks,
so I know we've reached time for, and we have to transition over to our Q&A. So let me take a look at what questions have come in. Valerie, in the meantime, anything else you'd like to add?
I think that it's important for the state to think about especially these college acceleration models and the diversity implementation for articulating courses versus implementing dual enrollment versus supporting AP or IB all beg different requirements from LEAs. It also pulls in the post-secondary institutions in different ways and or employers in different ways. And so I do think there's an opportunity also for the state, particularly with this new interagency council, to really think about a framework for providing additional support to LEAs as they try to not only enhance these CTE courses and pathways with college, but also incorporate the college acceleration models.
Great, thank you. So we have a question from Rebecca. She's a Bay Area college program coordinator, college access program coordinator. And so what she asks is that as a lead for a college access program in the Bay Area, I know that we need to do better to ensure California youth get access to high wage and high skill jobs in areas like tech and medicine. Can you talk to us a little bit about what role pathways like GSPP can play in helping diversify these high wage, high skill pathways, especially in areas like medicine and STEM? Valerie, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. I mean, GSPP is touching a large proportion of the state's high schools, and those high schools are disproportionately educating students who are low income, socioeconomically disadvantaged, from underrepresented minority groups. The fact that health pathways are a quarter of all of the pathways funded through GSPP suggests there is a great opportunity to expand and diversify the sort of health-related pathways. And I think what's great, particularly about the health pathways, is that there are opportunities to align not just with California community colleges, but also with the pathways that go to the four-year institutions directly from high school or through the community college. So I think there is a lot to say. Anything you'd want to add?
No, I think that's great. So we have another question from Myra. She's a college counselor in the Inland Empire, and what she says is that she's really interested in always finding new ways to partner with their local high schools. And she's really curious what opportunities programs like GSPP present for her and to establish kind of stronger connections from high school to college. So I say we weigh in on kind of just those opportunities. Can you start?
Yeah, you said she's an employer?
She's a college counselor and she's finding ways to be a better partner with the high schools in her region.
Gotcha. I mean, I think the first thing is to find out if there's a CCAP agreement in her region or for the district that she's associated with. Those college and career access programs are a sort of dual enrollment opportunity that integrates career and technical ed, if LEAs decide. And so this is a great way to sort of formalize the infrastructure around developing dual enrollment partnerships. I think, there are plenty of high school, all of the people we spoke to want more engagement from their post-secondary partners, because there is sort of a balance in making sure that all students have access to these college level courses. And then I think what's also key is we know that especially community colleges have existing partnerships with employers, and just sort of the various industry sectors. And so being able to share insight on how to structure some of these programs, ideas around work-based learning, this notion of internships or externships. Those are all, I think, great ways where colleges can be partnering with high schools.
Great. I will also add that California also has what's known as the Universal FAFSA or CADA policy, where high school districts must get their high schoolers to complete the FAFSA or opt out. FAFSA or CADA. So this is actually an opportunity for community colleges or four-year colleges to really, they have a lot of knowledge and support their students and can do more to work with high school counselors to really support efforts to boost FAFSA completion rates, because this would also enhance access to financial aid and address some of the major concerns on students and families' mind, which is affordability and the ability to pay for tuition and living expenses and all the costs associated with going to college. So I think given the kind of the structured program that GSPP is, I feel like there is that part of college knowledge, college readiness that they can support as well. Great. So we have a question from Eric. He's from Charter Schools Development Center. He notes that other states, notably Minnesota, have so-called post-secondary enrollment options laws that allow high school students to enroll in post-secondary institutions without the need to rely on school districts to create and offer these options. Could California accelerate the development of these sorts of options by adding these post-secondary enrollment options rather than waiting for existing districts to establish these partnerships and maintain them?
Yeah, I mean, what a timely question. SB, I think it's 640, was recently passed, and its goal is to simplify access to the CSU in particular. I think about 45 to 50 districts are participating where high school students can be automatically enrolled into or automatically granted admission into, I think, 12 of the CSU campuses based on their academic records. This type of initiative seems especially promising given what you're asking, Eric. And, in addition, the state has sort of a larger sets of dual admission programs running with both the CSU and the UC. I think the key issue here is how do we understand enrollment decisions, and that is not just driven by the selectivity of these different institutions, as we know varies notably in the state of California, but also within these programs and departments or majors, how students are organized and how things like financial aid matter, right? So understanding how the full package, I think, to give students more options is great to have these direct or more dual admission pathways. But I don't want to lose sight of the reality of affordability. Students' ability to move around the state will also be impacted in terms of who is able to use this, and if all of the public institutions are really able to really benefit and maximize enrollment when that's on the table.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Valerie, we've reached the end of the program. Thank you so much for your presentation and for joining me for this discussion. I now also like to thank our funders, the California Community Foundation, the College Futures Foundation, and the Gates Foundation. And thanks to you all for joining us today. We would really appreciate if you took a moment after this event to give us feedback. If you pre-registered for the event, you'll get a survey over email. But you'll also see a QR code, which you can scan to complete the survey now. Finally, I want to say that the recording of today's event will be available on our website and on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it and share it with your network. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.